The Bears still hold the top 2 spots in the draft. The tight end rankings in the 24 class, maybe they got a little shakeup this week. Who are the top 5 wide receivers in the 2024 NFL draft class? All that and more coming up next on the Draft Countdown Podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown Podcast. I am your co-host, Brian Bosarge, joined as always by my co-host, Shane P. Hallam. Shane, we are 189 days, 22 hours, 58 minutes, 19 seconds away from the 2024 NFL Draft.
I feel like the draft talk's heating up out there, right? Some of these NFL teams are starting to feel like, okay, we're well out of it. Let's look at the draft. So I think draft season is starting to come to fruition. So if you're new listening to the podcast, welcome. We'll get you all caught up.
Based off some of the Twitter comments I saw on your top 5 at each position post, I'd say some of these fan bases a little salty out there too, Shane. A little salty.
Look, I like to rile them up a little bit, get them mad. That gets the engagement. Let's do it.
Hey, we don't want to get soft out here. As always, if you're watching live along the show tonight and you have a question that you'd like answered, go ahead and ask it in the chat. If you're following on Twitter at Draft Countdown, send us a question there. We'll answer it. If you're a member of our Discord, you can send us a question there. If you're not, go to draftcountdown.com. Top right corner of the search bar is a link to our Discord channel. Come on in. We talk about all the games, anything fantasy, whatever you want to talk about. We'll talk about it there on the Discord channel. And if you're coming along on this new to YouTube, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you get notified when we go live each and every week with this podcast. Shane, as we've started the last couple of weeks, we're going to start right into the top 10 of the NFL draft. The order shuffled a little bit, not a whole lot. The Panthers lost again. They're 0-6, but that pick goes to the Chicago Bears as they now hold the number 1 pick and the number 2 pick, as they are themselves are 1-5. What's up with the Panthers?
They showed some promise. They actually got up 14-0 against the Dolphins. It was the Dolphins. They weren't going to win that game, but I think they're starting to develop. Frank Reich now is giving up play calling duties. I think that will help. So I feel like the Panthers aren't going to be winless here. You know, a lot of injuries. Bryce Young is starting to get it together. I think they'll get better. But they're just showing the talent right now.
Denver stays bad. They're 1-5. Arizona also 1-5. But Kyler Murray, coming off he's opened his practice window. He's got 3 weeks to get reacclimated and get back in there for Arizona. Don't know if that'll help. Can't hurt. New York Giants, maybe a surprising 1-5 here.
It's close. They were a yard away from beating the Bills and getting their second win. So the defense is playing better. I think, yeah, a little surprising, but I think they'll pull it together.
We don't think they're going to be in the top 5 when it's all said and done. Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe the offensive line is pretty rough, but we'll see.
Daniel Jones still bad. Speaking of bad quarterbacks, Mac Jones is not a good quarterback, and the Patriots are 1-5. Is this the swan song for Belichick?
I still don't believe they're going to fire him, but I don't know. Robert Kraft could do a lot of different things, but this might be it. If they keep losing, it's going to be hard to justify.
Somebody just bring this man in as a consultant or something. Let him go off in the sunset and but I believe it's over there in New England. Minnesota wins this week. They get to 2-4. Tennessee, we kind of predicted that they were going to hit the skids here, and that has come to fruition. Ryan Tannehill hurt last week. Malik Willis comes in at quarterback. Yeah, that ain't
not Will Levis. Not Will Levis.
Yeah, Malik Willis. That ain't it. Or we're going to see Will Levis at some point soon.
I hope so. If they keep losing, you got to try.
Green Bay in the top 10 here at 2-3, and the LA Chargers, after their loss on Monday night, fall to 2-3 as well. New Orleans just on the outside at 3-3, as well as Atlanta.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams are 3-3. So there's 9 teams right on the verge of being a wild card or being in the top 10. It's very tight right now.
Yeah, very, very, very close. And yeah, including the Cincinnati Bengals, who are going to the bye week 3-3. Your Steelers are on the bye week this week, 3-2, but no longer in the division lead. Baltimore gets to 4-2 and takes the division lead.
Yeah, so competitive.
No undefeated teams left either after this week.
Pop that champagne early, the Miami Dolphins, right? I mean, that was some wild upsets this week for the 49ers and Eagles both losing. I don't know, who do you think's the best team in the NFL? Like, it's hard after this week to pick. I think it's hard to decide.
I mean, the hottest team right now would be Kansas City, right? They've won 5 in a row after losing the opener to Detroit.
Yeah.
But are they the best team?
They're the best team. I mean, yeah, it's hard to say. Maybe still San Francisco. I don't know.
Well, while we're talking about Kansas City, let's move on to NFL in Week 6, and that Kansas City gets some reinforcements this week. They get Mecole Hardman back on the roster after he found himself 28 targets in 6 games. I think I read with the Jets. Gets traded back to Kansas City, where he was a year ago, and they do the ham sandwich trade here, a pick swap of 2025 picks. Does this mean anything to you at all?
I mean, it does because he's been there, so I feel like we know that they'll utilize him in some way. This isn't just, let's trade nothing for a guy and, Chase Claypool's not going to play again. We have had a lot of those ham sandwich trades, though. There's been a ton of those just salary dumping. But I think Mecole Hardman, the Chiefs don't really have a speed guy on the roster anymore, so maybe he'll help.
There was a lot of injuries in the NFL this week, right? Just some bigger name players. You got an update on any of that?
Yeah, look, we had a lot, especially, from a fantasy perspective, there's a lot. Christian McCaffrey with the oblique injury went down, didn't return. Seems like he might be okay. Justin Fields is going to be out this week with a hand injury. So Tyson Bagent, the undrafted rookie, we talked about a lot on this podcast. You saw at the Senior Bowl from Shepherd is going to start there. And their opponent
is Aiden O'Connell, right?
Well, yeah, their opponent this week's the Las Vegas Raiders. Jimmy Garoppolo had a back injury. Brian Hoyer came in for him. I don't think it's 100% that they're going to start Aiden O'Connell, but it seems likely that that's the case. Maybe it's Hoyer, but it's going to be one of the worst quarterback matchups we've had in years. Tyson Bagent against Aiden O'Connell, I feel like.
Not great.
Not great. Trevor Lawrence went down with a knee injury. He looks like he's going to play this week. We'll see. Deebo Samuel with a shoulder. Looks like he might play. Ramondre Stevenson had a concussion, came back. Dave Montgomery had a rib injury. He's out for some time. Kyron Williams is on fire for the Rams. Ankle injury. He's out. His backup, Brian Rivers, then ends up on IR for the year. So Mr. Zach Evans looks like might be the starter for the Rams.
Claimed him on waivers this week in the old fantasy league.
There you go. You mentioned Ryan Tannehill had the ankle injury. He was out. Marcus Davenport for the Saints was carted off. So it was an injury-filled week for the NFL in a lot of these spots.
It's rough, but this is the time of year where you test. These teams' depth get tested, and this is what separates those 9 3-3 teams. Who has the best depth to get them through to the end of the year, or to survive, I should say, this middle of the season stretch where it's going to get tough. So that's one thing. Uh, let's move on to week 7 of college football this past week. Before we do that, I want to throw this stat at you. It got brought to my attention today. We'll call this the unofficial stat of the week. We don't have
Love
a
it.
segment for this, but we may start.
Maybe you got to be on it, Brian. You got to do the
stat of the week. After their game this past week, Auburn has had one 100-yard passing game, not rushing, not receiving, one 100-yard passing game in their last 7 SEC games. And that was this past week where Peyton Thorne come through for 102 yards.
Wow. That is wild.
That is their first 100-yard passing game in their last 7 conference games, dating back to the game against Mississippi last year, who they play this week.
Wow. Yeah, that's yikes. That does
big,
not bode well.
That's a big yuck. That's what that is.
Bode well.
No,
Wow. I'm looking at some of these. That is wild. Yeah. Robbie Ashford last year, 77, 60, 75.
Peyton
Crazy.
Thorne had a game for 44 yards against somebody earlier this season. It's brutal. Brutal. Speaking of brutal, there was some shakeup, some tight end injuries this week. One was to the top tight end prospect, Brock Bowers. What was the name of the surgery he had?
Tightrope
surgery, which is an ankle surgery. Do we think that this is going to keep him out for the rest of the season?
It shouldn't, but it might be one of those things where it's late enough for him. Is it worth coming back? And it is an injury that you can re-injure it. There's more of a risk if you come back too early. So I don't know if he'll want to shut it down or not. But it shouldn't affect his draft, working out or anything like that at the very least.
Normally, I would say this wouldn't affect someone like Georgia because they have so much depth everywhere, but they don't beat us. Talking about how bad Auburn was, Auburn with their 62 yards passing from Peyton Thorne a few weeks ago probably beats Georgia if not for Brock Bowers' heroics in the second half there in the fourth quarter, right? So they needed every bit of Brock Bowers in that fourth quarter to get that win. They do have Oscar Delp, who I believe is another 5-star tight end, right? So, I mean, they've got him, another true freshman. I can't remember his name, but made some impact early.
Pierce Spurlin. Well. Yeah, he's another, high. They have a lot of high recruits. I like Oscar Delp a lot, but it's not Brock Bowers. It's different.
Right. Another guy who was seemingly poised to be the next Iowa tight end that takes the NFL by storm, transfer from Michigan, Eric All. Was moving up tight end boards, tears his ACL last week.
That's the second Iowa tight end out for the season, Luke Lachey as well, who was another NFL prospect out. So it's going to be interesting to see if, especially for Eric All, he might still declare. He was around Michigan for a while. We'll see if those guys still come out for the draft.
It's tough. It's tough. You hate to see that. I know All was. I would say poised to at least be at the Senior Bowl, right? Because just from the talk that had come up. All right, so let's move on to the best players we saw in week 17 of college football. And my best offensive player, this was going to be easy, right? Because it was going to come from one game. It was going to come from Washington and Oregon. It had to. And I could have gone with Michael Penix. That would have been a way to go. But I thought that Rome Odunze, the wide receiver, put on the best performance that I've saw. Just the fourth year, he's an elite level prospect to me. I think you had him in your top 20 today or top 25 of your rankings, your new board that came out. He's great catching 50-50 ball. He can take a short pass, can go to distance with it. His ball tracking is some of the best in this draft class, in my opinion. Was targeted 11 times against Oregon, caught 8 of them for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. I thought Odunze was the best prospect I saw this week on the offensive side of the ball.
He's good, and he has some size. He's not one of these kind of thin rail, no offense, Brian, John Ross receivers coming out of Washington. he actually has some size to him, can play outside, can play in the slot. Yeah, I really like Odunze. Had a great game against Oregon, who they really struggled against those receivers.
Amazingly, Washington has a fourth NFL prospect at wide receiver emerged this week, coming off the injured list. Giles Jackson come back. He is a smaller guy at 5'9", 175, but he had a good game as well. 6 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown. Just 4 wide receivers, on that team that could all be playing on Sunday. Wild.
Yeah. They're on pace to be the greatest offense in college football history, ahead of the Joe Burrow, Jamar
LSU.
Chase,
Wow.
LSU. Yeah.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah.
That's impressive. That is impressive. Who was the best offensive player you saw this week?
Yeah, honestly, there wasn't many of new players that I was like, oh yeah, this guy want to highlight. So I'm going to go with someone you brought up a couple weeks ago that we talked about last week. Wasn't in my top 5 running back, still isn't. But Ray Davis, the running back for Kentucky, had another really solid game in the loss to Missouri. Averaged over almost 6.5 yards a carry. When they just ran him, they were successful, and then when they got away from it, that was the problem. He caught a touchdown in the red zone as well, showed off some of his hands. So if he wasn't 24 years old, I'd feel a lot better. But he is a tough inside runner, turning those legs. Just the way that he can kind of get skinny through a hole and is very difficult to bring down a first contact. It feels like there's an NFL role out there for Ray Davis. So I was pretty happy with his performance against Mizzou.
All right. You watched Florida and South Carolina. You watched Missouri and Kentucky last week. How bad is it going to be?
It might be bad. It might be bad. So we'll see. We'll see.
I've made peace
with
how bad it's going to be.
It's okay.
All right, let's move on to the defensive side of the ball, where I actually have a defensive player this week, and it was one that was not on our watch list. He got the ad. I don't think he's going to enter this draft class. This is only a third-year defender. But edge rusher from UTSA, Trey Moore, popped this week for me. 6'3", 235 against UAB, 3.5 sacks, had a strip sack fumble on one of the sacks, 5 tackles, 4 solos, just a dominant performance from the Roadrunner defender.
That's a good name. I haven't focused on him, so I'll have to write that down and go back and watch some.
Like I said, I think he's probably more of a 25 prospect than he is a 24 prospect, just based off being UTSA and an undersized edge rusher. But I think he's more in line for next year. But he's really stood out. It's just a name I wanted to get on our list, if nothing else.
No, I like it. Good call. I like those diamond in the rough names for sure.
Who's the best defender you saw this week?
Yeah, we're going with Florida Gator here against your South Carolina Gamecocks. Princely Umanmielen from Florida, had a sack in the game, had another tackle for loss in the game, and he was in the backfield multiple times. His motor runs a little hot and cold. I felt like there's some series where he was kind of dogging it a little bit. I think we have that sometimes with these edge rushers and front 7 guys where it's like, it's not every play. But, I mean, the place where he was on, he was hot. I mean, he was on, and South Carolina could not block Umanmielen to save their life. So I think he's moved up my board a lot after watching that performance. I think has a shot to be a day 2, another Florida defender going day 2 as a pass rusher.
Yeah, he's a guy I thought a lot about as well. But to me, when I was watching the game, I thought he did most of his damage in the second half. And to me, that coincided. South Carolina reshuffled their offensive line this week, and it was really improved, it looked. And then the guy they moved from center to right tackle, Vershawn Lee, gets hurt. And he's out for the season now. And they brought in a true freshman to play right tackle. That's when Umanmielen took over there in the second half. That's
good be, but
good context. I just put in a context there.
Yeah,
I thought he had a great game as well, and he's probably one of my favorite prospects on that Florida team, to be honest.
All right. Yeah.
So let's move on now to week 8, where we look at the 8 games that we're focusing on this week. And Shane, you're first up with a game that took place last night. So let's talk about Western Kentucky and Jacksonville State, game that was at 6:30 last night on ESPNU.
It was fun. Your Jacksonville State Gamecocks, man. They won. They won. I didn't think they would win that game. They were down for most of it to Western Kentucky. I was watching kind of those big Western Kentucky names. Austin Reed, the quarterback for Western Kentucky, didn't play particularly well. I mean, Jacksonville State, a lot of press coverage, got some pass rushing in there. And Malachi Corley, the big receiver, who I do like a lot, it's in my top 10 receivers, kind of quiet. He had a quiet game where he usually can dominate. So it was kind of interesting to see Jacksonville State almost, shut them down ultimately.
Yeah, I was wondering how Corley. Did you happen to catch any Jacksonville State interior offensive lineman Clay Webb last night? Just curious.
Yeah, I did. Let me look at my notes here. Yeah, I had him circled pretty good, especially in terms of run blocking and movement. So they had a lot of Zion Webb was running all over the place. Oftentimes not even some QB blast type things, and they ran behind Clay Webb. I mean, that was kind of we're just going to run behind him. So really kind of more of a road grading. I thought his footwork was pretty good. So solid, not super athletic, maybe undrafted, late round guy.
Yeah, he that's kind of what I thought of him when I watched him earlier this season against UTEP as well. If there's one thing I can say, though, if you can't run block, you're probably not going to play much in Rich Rod's offense there. So,
right.
So let's move on. I had changed a game around to get this game in. It's going on tonight. Was going on right now on ESPN2. New Mexico State at UTEP. I've seen UTEP play earlier this season. Their quarterback, Gavin Hardison, not going to play tonight. But they've got a couple of good defenders in Praise Amawule, the edge rusher, and Tyrese Knight. Their linebacker are 2 good players. But the guy that brought me to the table here, because I've been seeing him a lot on Twitter this season, and that's New Mexico State quarterback Diego Pavia. I have no idea if it's the hype is worthy, but I'm going to get a good look at him tonight.
Yeah, look, he's a big college fantasy football player. He's been putting up a lot of numbers, definitely on the small side for a quarterback, but kind of intriguing for a team. New Mexico State playing well for a team I didn't expect to do that well.
Jerry Keel, their head coach, right?
Yeah.
Former Minnesota coach. All right, let's move on to Saturday now at 11 a.m. on the ACC network. Shane, you'll be watching Boston College at Georgia Tech. A couple of underachieving teams here. Boston College, Christian Mahogany, their interior offensive line, probably their best prospect. If I had to garner a guess, maybe not. Georgia Tech has a corner that I liked a lot last year. Curious to see if he's still doing anything of note. LaMiles Brooks, their 6'2", 184 corner for Georgia Tech.
No, it's good. Yeah, I'm excited to see Christian Mahogany. That's really why I picked this game with him being back from injury, and seems like he's playing well. So I'm excited to watch some of these linemen that I've kind of bypassed so far this season. Georgia Tech does have some intriguing defenders, because Kevin Harris for them popped for me, but similarly, I don't think he's really much of a prospect. So I'm interested to see if the defense, if any of these guys kind of pop out in this game.
Yeah, it's I haven't watched them yet. I haven't watched neither one of those teams yet. The game I stole from you, Shane, 11 a.m. on Fox, Penn State at Ohio State. I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to watch these 2 teams, let's just watch this one, right? And this game loaded with prospects, as we know here. I guess the matchup. Are we going to get Ibuka back this week?
It's a good question. I think it's still a little bit up in the air. I think if he can play, he's going to play. But they're kind of keeping all the health for him. Travion Henderson, very hush-hush. But I have a feeling we'll see Ibuka out there if he can go.
If if we get to see this matchup this week, I hope we do. Marvin Harrison Jr., who we'll talk a lot more about here in a minute, and Kalen King, the corner from Penn State. That's a matchup maybe we'll get this week. We'll see. Be intriguing if we do. Theo Johnson, the tight end from Penn State. I saw his name pop up this week. Is he got the goods?
He's starting to get the goods. I loved him coming out of high school. I thought he was going to be a stud, just never come to fruition. But I think they're realizing he's their best kind of receiving weapon out there. So Penn State started utilizing him more. I like Theo Johnson, very athletic, big, rangy tight end. Their other tight end, Tyler Warren. The Penn State tight ends are athletic, and he can block. Like, good tight end room for them once again.
I guess another matchups I hope we get to see is either Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau against Olu Fashanu, right? I mean, that's something.
Yeah, it should be Sawyer's side, so he should at least get some reps there against those two. Fashanu is just, man, I'm still a stud on the left tackle side. I can't believe it.
Yeah, the other edge rusher in this game that I want to see is Chop Robinson from Penn State. I know you said today you're a little down on him this season, so we'll see how he does in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be a really good matchup. So I'm excited. I'm going to watch it anyway.
Of course,
I'm excited for you to watch it. Tommy Eichenberg too for Ohio State. I want to see how he does against these running backs for Penn State.
Yeah, it's. I could watch this game 3 times and probably not.
I probably will have to.
And not see all these matchups we need to see. Another game at 11 a.m. I'll be watching on ABC is UCF at Oklahoma. I haven't watched the Sooners yet this year. We talked about him last week, and you highlighted him earlier. Now I've got to focus fire here on because when you put your top 5 linebackers out on Twitter, I was like, I haven't watched 3 of these guys, so I've got to get on the ball here. And Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma was one of those guys, 3rd-year player, listed at 6'2", 215. I imagine his weight's probably up a little bit from that. But so he's got a guy I'm definitely going to focus on. UCF, they're a good team, but not a great team, not a whole lot of talent there. So mostly this will be focusing on the Oklahoma guys. Anxious to see Stanford transferred offensive tackle Walter Rouse. Brent Venables did a hell of a job at Oklahoma this year, turning that team around. They were 6-7 last year, and now they're top 5 team in the country.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised. I would not have guessed this. Also guy that you have talked about on the show before, Tyler Guyton, the offensive tackle for Oklahoma, starting to get some first round buzz for him. So definitely intriguing. And a guy I like, no one's really talking about from Oklahoma is Billy Bowman, their safety, really good athlete, 5-star prospect. He's not getting any love. I feel like he should get more love.
You know who's going to get drafted in the 7th round and make the NFL team next year? Drake Stoops. It's going to happen.
I can see it. It's pretty good.
2:30 on CBS, Shane. It's the 3rd Saturday in October. It's Tennessee at Alabama on CBS. This game intrigues me because I really have liked what I've seen from John Campbell Jr., the offensive tackle from Tennessee. He's going to get tested this week for sure with either or both Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. They've got a couple of interior offensive linemen that we got on our watch list are going to get tested by Justin Aboigwe and others. And don't look now, but Jermaine Burton is
coming back.
He's coming back. He's like, hey, remember me?
Yeah, wide receiver for Alabama, transferred from Georgia. I thought he was dead in the water, but Alabama's hurting for those weapons, so we'll see. Yeah, I'm excited to see the edge rushers because I feel like my notes just haven't matched up to their talent and even to the stats. So I'm like, I feel like I'm missing something here with Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell. I want to see them. J.C. Latham, the offensive tackle for Alabama's, fringe first round hype, big athlete. And, let's see Kool-Aid McKinstry, top corner, potential top 5 pick in this draft. Tennessee's system is hard to cover, so I want to see if you can do it.
This could be the final nail in the draft obituary or draft coffin of Joe Milton, right?
Yeah, I think he's, you know, I feel like he is what he is. Maybe he ends up in the 6th or 7th round just to take the height, weight, speed, arm type player. But Joe Milton really needs to show out if he wants to be back in the conversation.
100%. Also, chance to see Senior Bowl kicker Will Reichert for Alabama this game.
Yeah, hopefully they don't pass up a 3rd round kicker to bring him in.
Yeah, well, it's gonna happen. It's like
he's
Fetch.
gonna be there.
It's like Fetch. It's gonna happen, Shane.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen.
He'll be on my prediction list. I'll say that.
He will be or won't be.
He will.
Oh, I would hope so. Absolutely. If you want to get one right, you're going to get that one on there. Michigan at Michigan State, 6:30 p.m. on NBC. Shane, you'll have this one, and like we said, Michigan is undefeated, but they have played it's the best team they played, UNLV.
Maybe Bowling Green, where JJ McCarthy threw 3 picks. That could be it.
Could be. We're going to talk a little bit more about JJ McCarthy at the end of the show, so we'll hold off on that. But who from Michigan State here can stand out against Michigan?
We've talked about Jacoby Windman, the linebacker for them, a couple times. I think he has that kind of potential to be a special teams ace in the NFL, maybe play a little bit. So I like him and Cal Halliday, their other linebacker as well. Chris Bogle, the edge rusher. If he can get any kind of pressure through that Michigan offensive line, then he's getting a check mark in my book because it's the best offensive line in the country. But Michigan State definitely down after what they're going through this season. It's been tough.
What are your thoughts on Michigan wide receiver Roman Wilson?
I think he's a top 50 type pick. I might be a little lower in my rankings than where he'll go, but I think he's just an ultimate kind of Swiss Army knife weapon. Get the ball in his hands in space, and Roman Wilson will make you miss, do big things. I think he's in that conversation, and a lot of people aren't ready for it. We're going to talk about our top 5 receivers tonight. I don't think he's going to be in either of our list. He's probably going to go above one of the receivers on our list.
There you go. Finally, 7 p.m. on the ACC network. Clemson at Miami. This game here is interesting for me because I don't know what to think about Miami. I mean, they should be they lost to North Carolina last week, right?
Yeah.
And then shouldn't have lost to Georgia Tech the week before that, but that's neither here nor there. I thought I got lulled back in. He brought me back in. Tyler Van Dyke did, and it's just
out the door.
It's out the door. All the goodwill has been flushed away. There's a lot of players on their team that are just seemingly underachieving. Leonard Taylor, their big-time defensive line prospect, not having the best season. A couple other guys. One guy who is having a great season is their safety, Cameron Kinchins. So I'll be interested to watch him. Clemson's got some guys in the secondary that I'm going to focus fire on in this one. And Barrett Carter is another one of those linebackers that you had. He was your top linebacker.
He's been an absolute monster this year. I mean, he is doing everything when you watch that defense.
So what does he do different than their other linebacker, Jeremiah Schroeder Jr., who was seemingly the top linebacker prospect coming into the season?
Jeremiah Trotter reminds me a bit of Trenton Simpson last year, right? Where kind of undisciplined. He has the athletic ability. You see the upside, but it's not putting it together. And Barrett Carter is the, almost locked in leader, knows exactly where the offense is going when they're going. He's there. He's making the wrap tackle. It's just more reliable, but maybe not the upside of Jeremiah Trotter Jr.
They have a safety, Andrew Makuba, who's a good player. Sheridan Jones, their corner, another guy I like as well. So anxious to see how they play against Miami. All right, so that's going to do it for our Week 8 preview. 8 games there. Is there any other game happening this weekend we're not watching that you'll probably watch anyway?
That's a good question. I haven't gone through the schedule to kind of pick out,
Right.
outside of the other ones, which ones I'm going to watch. But it's not an awful day of college football. But I'm going to be, I'm going to be locked in Ohio State,
Yeah.
Penn State.
I mean, I'll watch South Carolina, Missouri, obviously, but it's
Yeah, Utah, USC. I see if USC can bounce back after disappointing me against Notre Dame. And Utah's defense has been tough. That's probably a big one.
that's to me that's big for Caleb Williams. He's had back-to-back weeks where he's been on the struggle bus a little bit, and he needs to get right. And I don't know if Utah's defense is the defense to get right
Yeah,
against.
it's tough. Yeah, it's a tough one to do. So we'll see if he
Yeah,
can.
that team's in for a bad way. They've got back-to-back games coming up in November against Oregon and Washington. That's
You better score a lot more points against those teams.
Their defense is not going to be equipped for that, I don't believe. All right, let's move on to our lock of the week, Shane. At what point do our listeners start fading your picks?
Start doing it now, because then I'll start hitting. So please, you can start fading my picks. Yeah, I'm going to go back. What's that?
We've got 3 in a row now on the
three in a
loss
row.
side?
I mean, I think I'm just getting baited by Vegas on some of these, where it's like, oh, I gotta pick that. It seems easy, and it just doesn't hit. So I'm going back to my roots with this one.
All right, what are we looking at, Shane?
I'm taking Michigan State plus 24.5. I get at home against Michigan. I think I'm going with some big dogs. That's been the tried and true method here. This feels like Michigan State's national championship, right? Like if you're going to play up in one game this season, it's going to be against your rival, who they're more rival to you than you are to them, and you're going to try to salvage this season and show, hey, we're worth something. I think you keep it within 3 touchdowns when you're playing up to that.
You know who's another big dog this week that I like? And they're not my lock here, but I do like. I like Arizona State. I believe they're getting 27.5 against Washington. Washington coming off that big win, man, against Oregon. That strikes me as, a little letdown.
If it was in Arizona State, I would have taken them. I thought about that one.
And Wazoo's another one. They're getting a pretty big number from Oregon as well.
Yeah, after they burned me 2 weeks ago.
I know.
I can't do it anymore.
I'm with you, but I like both of those big dogs in the Pac-12 this week. Just based off of, how much did you leave on the field in the week before, and you having to come back to play the next week. But you said you're going back to your roots, Shane. I know a damn good thing when I see it. And the UNLV running Rebels are a good thing. Undefeated against the spread in 2023, Shane. UNLV against Colorado State, who is not playing good ball right now. But UNLV at home, giving up a little over a touchdown, 7.5 points. I like them anyway. They've scored 40-plus points 5 weeks in a row, Shane. UNLV, big number, minus 7.5 against Colorado State.
Like if they score 40, I think you're in good shape, right? If they can hit that 40 mark again, I think you're good. I like it.
I do too. UNLV.
All right. I'm betting on them right now.
All right. So let's move on to what makes Shane happy. Shane loves to talk about wide receivers.
Yes.
And skill position players.
It pains me to limit this to 5. Like the draft countdown I could not limit it to 5. I did 7 because I think there's a big tier of the first 7 are in a tier.
Yeah, and
it's hard.
I'm gonna be honest. I could have went a lot more than 5 as well. Here, this wide receiver group is great, and we could see 14 to 15 go in the first 3 rounds, I believe, easily. But we're going to try to limit it to 5. We may add a few more names. At the
end, we got to toss in a couple names.
So let's start with number 1. We're both the same here. It's the guy who Dane Brugler said middle of last season would have been the number 1 receiver in the last year's draft class. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. from Ohio State.
I wrote an article at the beginning of the season. Is he the best receiver prospect ever? He isn't, but he's not that far off when you look at the athletic skill set, look at the production, you kind of line up everything. It's like, he's not Calvin Johnson, right? But he's up there in terms of the receiver prospects that we've seen that I've graded highly. I think he's in that Jamar Chase category. Maybe I overrate. A lot of people disagree with that statement. But I think Harrison has that kind of juice. And the fact that he is probably going to come in 6'2 and a half, 6'2 and a quarter, 185 pounds, like 100. The rumor is maybe he's even closer to 200 pounds this year. And if he keeps the 4.3, 4.4 flat speed, I just don't know how you don't take him in the top 5.
I saw a comp earlier, maybe it was a bit last week, that comped him to AJ Green coming out of Georgia. You like that?
I think it's a good comp, and I think he's more athletic than AJ Green was even. But yeah, it is a good comp.
Number 2 on my board is this. I think it's the same as yours, but he's been injured this year, and like I said, we may not see him play this week, and that's Marvin Harrison Jr.'s teammate, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. There's a lot to like there as well, but we haven't seen the production from him this year, obviously, that we've seen from Harrison Jr.
We haven't. I think you can make an argument for Egbuka too. I think you can make an argument for him at 6 or 7. I wouldn't say, you're wrong here if you have someone different. But I think Egbuka's separation is just on a different level in terms of each area of the field, short, medium, long. He can play in the slot. He can play outside. The versatility is there. We haven't seen it this year. I think if the draft were tomorrow, he would not be the second receiver off the board, but 5-star recruit, good athlete. We'll say that about all these top 5 receivers. They're all really good athletes. I think Egbuka just gives you a little reliability in today's NFL game that maybe some of the other receivers don't have.
Is he number 2 on your board?
Yes.
Okay. So this is where we're going to start seeing differences, I believe, based off the tweet I saw from you earlier and what I have on my board. Number 3 for me, I talked about him earlier. Washington wide receiver Rome Odunze has moved up to number 3 on my wide receiver board. That happened this week after I saw how he abused Oregon, and just seeing that ball track in live action this week was enough to say, like, you can't teach that. You can't coach that up, right? That's just that's center fielder Willie Mays ball tracking from Rome Odunze. And, I think the speed is going to be there as well. 6'3", 201 listed. So probably 6'2", when the official measurements come in. I really like how well he's played up to this point. And, last year as well, when he jumped out to me last year when I watched him as well. So Odunze, number 3 here for me.
Well, he could have come out last year, but a day 2 pick. I think that would have happened. Now, you mentioned earlier, the top 7 receivers on my board are all my top 25 of my big board, right? I have all his first round picks. So Rome Odunze, I have him at 7. And the reason it's not necessarily Rome Odunze, I think everything you said is accurate, Brian. The offense for Washington is just hard to handle. It's like Tennessee last year. I think Odunze is a much better prospect than Jalen Hyatt was, right? But similar things. You're stacking receivers. It's kind of one read. Like the safety is always isolated. Every time Rome Odunze gets a pass thrown his way, there's no safety. I want to see a split the safety in the corner. We never get to see that in the Washington.
You don't see a whole shot in the Washington offense.
Right. Like, it's not going to happen, where the receiver is kind of feeling that zone coverage. So to me, that's my one worry. Maybe it's just a blind spot for myself. Odunze could end up being the best receiver in this class. But it's a hard evaluation to really know and feel confident in that for me.
That's fair. Who's number 3 for you?
Number 3 for me is Malik Neighbors, wide receiver for LSU. Really came on last year when Kayshon Boutte was struggling early and has not looked back. He's on the smaller side, kind of, and we have a number of these guys, these kind of smaller athletic receivers, 6 foot, 190. But man, it's such a natural pass catcher, and then he turns into a running back after the catch. Had the big 239-yard game against Mississippi State. I think he has He has 5 catches or more in every game this season. Like Neighbors is an alpha receiver, has played like it in a high-flying offense with Jaden Daniels. I thought he made Jaden Daniels much better last year. I think Jaden Daniels is playing better this year, and you're seeing the results for Neighbors. I think he could play a nice wide receiver in the NFL right off the bat.
Yeah, Neighbors is currently 6 on my board, but again, he's similar to you. When my board up rankings update, he'll be in my top 32 prospects. So it's like where he's going to get a first round grade, but this receiver is how do you stack these receivers? What do you value more? And I have certain other, my eyeballs tell me slightly different than what you do, but ultimately we're going to end up in the same range of where these guys come off the board. Number 4 for me, you mentioned smaller receiver, and I'm toying with the idea of writing something next week about how this has now become acceptable in the NFL, where 7-8 years ago, maybe this isn't a thing, but now you can draft 160, 170 pound wide receiver. It doesn't matter, right? Because of the way the rules have been altered and just the speed of the release of these guys. So Xavier Worthy from Texas, to me, comes in at number 4, and his speed, it could be maybe of this whole, he could be maybe the fastest receiver in this class, or at least of the guys that are going to go probably high. You might see a FCS receiver at his pro day run 4.2 something or whatever, but I think Worthy's going to be the fastest wide receiver at the combine probably when it's all said and done. And he can stop, start, he can just get down the field, he can catch those passes on the sideline and then turn it upfield and just outrun every angle. Stop me if I'm wrong here. I'm not a big comp guy, and you know that, but is Hollywood Brown like a comp for this guy?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. Especially in terms of skill set and size, I think it's definitely fair. Xavier Ward is 6th on my board, so he's not my top 5, which he used to be. He was number 1 in this class after his freshman season. So I'm with you. I think he's going to be a 4.3 speed player. But yeah, we see Hollywood Brown, we see Devonta Smith, right? You don't have to be a big receiver anymore. I think Worthy has the electrifying ability that NFL teams want. He just has some of those fundamental issues. A lot of drops last year, had the injured hand. Maybe, according to him, it's a very weird situation. Maybe it affected him this year. Definitely has some games where I feel like he hasn't gotten as open as he could be. You're right. You get the ball in his hands. It's like, boom, that's what you really need to do. So once again, in my top 25 prospects of this class, I think he's a phenomenal athlete and gonna be a good player, but may not have the ceiling because of that size of some of these other guys. He's not Devonta Smith. He's more Hollywood Brown.
Who's number 4 on your board?
I'm going. A guy I think is underrated in this class is Troy Franklin, the receiver from Oregon. I think he's phenomenal, and he's been phenomenal from the very beginning since he was a true freshman. 5-star prospect for them. He's another guy who's kind of tall, lanky, but I'll be surprised if he makes it into the 190s weight wise. Like, I don't think he's that heavy. But I mean, another very speed receiver, that long strides with the lack of weight. He just gets behind you, can catch the long pass, really good on the sideline, really good footwork. I love his route running ability. Oregon's not a school that runs a ton of routes, but it seems like they opened the route tree a little more this year for Troy Franklin to let him do some different things and change up the film. Maybe I'm wrong in my assessment there, but it's really, I think he's a smart receiver who dominated Washington. I mean, he was dominant in that game. So I'm a big fan. I think he's like I said, I think he's underrated and should be in the first round conversation.
I have Franklin at 7 currently on my board, but again, like I said, when I redo my board, he could end up in that first round range as well.
That means we have the same 5 then, right? I think.
I believe that's where we're going to end up here. At number 5 is going to be Keon Coleman, Is that who's number 5 for you?
Yes, number 5 on my board. Yep.
The wide receiver from Florida State, transferred from Michigan State. Great size, right? 6'4", 200 pounds. Looks every bit of 210, 215. Like he's rocked up, rock solid. Can go up and get that 50-50 ball. Can make the ridiculous catches. He runs great routes. His hands are great. And then, as we see this week, the man can return punts.
Yeah.
What's not to love about the value there, right? That you're going to get in the 20s, probably. You get 2 starters in one spot.
Yeah, I think him and Worthy are probably 2 of the better punt returners in the class too.
Right.
So, how are you not taking those guys? Yeah, I love Keon Coleman because you're getting, the 6'4", probably up to 210, 215 this year. One-handed catches. He's just big, great red zone threat. But I mean, he's fast. He's athletic. He's really hard to cover one-on-one. You just can't do it. I think NFL teams are just going to love that because there's not really outside of Harrison, another X receiver, right? And so I think Keon Coleman is your shot at that kind of play. We saw Jonathan Mingo go way too high because he's an X receiver, and there weren't a ton in this last class. I think Keon Coleman could be the same way.
Speaking of Jonathan Mingo and, those receivers that similar profile to Jonathan Mingo is number 9 on my board, Xavier Legette. I don't know where he ended up on yours, but that's a similar profile, right?
16 on mine, but
but
fair.
But a late breakout, at
least he's breaking it. Jonathan Mingo didn't even break out. He didn't even have any production.
That's true.
Xavier
That's
Legette,
true.
at least
Legette's at least producing at
this year.
at a very high level this year. Round out your top 10 quickly. 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, 8's Jalen McMillan from Washington. So Rome, he was hurt. 9
also 8 on my board.
There you go. Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky is 9 on my board.
11 on mine.
Big fan. And then Roman Wilson, we talked about, is 10. And I'm going to give one more. Adonai Mitchell from Texas. AD Mitchell's really moving up.
I have not watched Texas yet, so we talked about that last week. I don't have him yet. But 10 on my board is Jacob Cowing from Arizona.
Yeah, also having a great year.
So Jalen Polk.
Jalen Polk. Where's your boy Juice Wells? I know he hasn't played much this year for South Carolina.
Still holding at 14 on my board.
That's
but continued. I keep bumping him down, because I see these other receivers, and I move I moved Johnny Wilson ahead of him this week.
Oh, yeah, I can't do that, but yeah,
I know. Who further down the board do you really like as a sneaky guy?
Devontae Walker came back from North Carolina these last 2 weeks. Tez Walker got 3 touchdowns for UNC. I think if he keeps playing like that, I think he could end up in day 2.
Jamari Thrash at Louisville, Georgia State transfer. Yeah, having a big year for Louisville. So yeah, we've talked about a lot of receivers. That was good. Got that discussion out there. We had one kind of question in the comment section from our good friend over in Ireland, man, G10. Big, always listening on a late basis, but he kind of asked a question here. Well, I'll form him in a question for you, Shane. He thinks that Drake May could go number 1 over Caleb Williams.
I don't think it's 0%, especially after that game against Notre Dame. I wouldn't say it's 0%. Drake May is starting to kind of take off the other way. I'd be pretty floored still if it would happen. I mean, Caleb Williams just has the body of work. This is recency. Reeks of recency bias, I guess, because to me, Drake May's 2 best games this season have coincided with Caleb Williams' 2 worst games. So it's that's where that's kind of feels for me. I still think Drake May's a top 5 pick. I think he probably goes number 2. I mean, ultimately, someone will move up for him if they have to. But yeah, I mean, there were people before the year that were kind of saying, "Oh, they're close," and then it kind of we stopped hearing about it. And then Dane Brugler came out before the Notre Dame game, "Oh, Drake May's challenging for the number 1 spot," and now then the Notre Dame game happened for Caleb Williams. So, it's possible he's a lot bigger, but Caleb Williams just too dynamic. I don't believe it.
His other part of this, so I'm going to say buy or sell JJ McCarthy top 5 pick.
I mean, I'll sell it, but I think it could happen. Like, I don't like JJ McCarthy yet as a prospect. If he comes in and plays well against Penn State and Ohio State, and it's not cover 0 against Ohio State this year, then I might buy in. I think NFL teams can buy into the athleticism to what JJ McCarthy's doing. You did throw into double coverage twice for interceptions against Bowling Green. I don't know if I'll ever get over that as watching that. But like JJ McCarthy is QB3. I could see it. I think it'd be a mistake. I think I would be lower on him, like I have been. Daniel Jones, Zach Wilson, Anthony Richardson, Josh Allen, both sides of the spectrum are good and bad. That I was lower on, that I didn't think should be first round picks. McCarthy would fall into that category.
There you go. Final thoughts from you, Shane. I'll ask this one last thing from you. When you were stacking your board this week, what was the biggest surprise to you on how well that you moved a player up, that you, after you started stacking, like, hey, I didn't think that was going to happen, but here we are?
Well, that's a good question. I think a lot of it was the offensive tackles. I didn't think would be as high on my board as they are. Like, they're an athletic group, but offensive tackle is usually one where, I need some more information. It's not my best, my best position, I think, to scout. But yeah, I had, Kingsley Suamataia, who I definitely like more than anyone else, at number 10. But then Amarius Mims from Georgia at 19, and Graham Barton for Duke was
that
probably
one took me off guard a little bit.
I had him at 26, and I was like, it lines up. He's playing that way when the rest of Duke is not. So I think that's where I was surprised. Those other tackles were a little higher than I thought.
Yeah, final thought from me. Next week, we're going to talk about tight ends. And I love the tight end position. But spoiler alert for everybody out there, this ain't the 2023 NFL draft class at tight end. It's just not. Let's temper the expectations down a little bit for that next week. All right, so that's going to do it for tonight's edition of the Draft Countdown podcast. As a reminder, if you're new to the channel and you come across this, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, like the videos, share them out. If you listen to this on an audio platform, be it Spotify or Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review, leave a nice comment there, and share out that as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Deep Fried Draft. Follow Shane on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam. Follow Draft Countdown on Twitter at Draft Countdown. And for all of your NFL draft needs daily, go to draftcountdown.com. For Shane, I'm Brian. Good night, everybody.